My country, Syria, reaffirms its condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, regardless of its source, its perpetrators, be they individuals, groups, or states, because it is aggressive and unjust criminal acts that target the lives and property of innocent people, and because its effects touch everybody without distinction. Mr. President, today started as a sunny, beautiful day in your capitals and in most capitals across the world. But today in Damascus, it was a bloody day. Our capital shook as a result of 2 suicide terrorist bombings which took the lives of 56 innocent individuals and injured 372 others who received grave injuries. In addition to the remains of 15 individuals who still have not been identified. This is what characterizes the morning that Damascus witnessed today as different from the morning of all other capitals in the world. It is so appropriate, Mr. President, that I am delivering my statement today on behalf of my government, addressing the members of the Security Council, since we are all here discussing anti-terrorism. At 7:30 of this morning, 2 suicide terrorist bombers exploded 2 vehicles laden with explosives in a densely populated area filled with civilians in the Syrian capital of Damascus. That area contained 4 schools, primary schools, preparatory schools, and secondary schools. The 2 explosions took place at a time when students were on their way to school. And the explosions led, as I explained earlier, to tens of innocent victims, both civilians and military. The Special Envoy, Mr. Kofi Annan, quickly condemned this cowardly act, as did General Mood, Chief of the Observer Mission. We expect from the Security Council, under your wise leadership, a clear and strong condemnation of this cowardly act and a firm position to deal with this act in all its dimensions, Arab, regional, and international dimensions. This explosion took place at the same time as another explosion that was carried out in Aleppo this morning, and which led also to several civilian victims and massive damages to private property. Mr. President, the distinguished members of the Council are well aware that while Syria witnessed a noticeable reduction in the levels of violence, there has been recently an increase in the scale and frequency of terrorist activities and operations in Syria. Extremist terrorist groups have emerged using unusual criminal methods by carrying out organized terrorist operations based on extremist takfiri rulings, i.e. Those that label others with apostasy, and these are issued by inciters who reside in countries very well known to everybody. These groups use suicide bombers, booby-trapped cars, and explosive belts and packages to attack targets in vital facilities and the infrastructure in various areas and to spread fear among citizens. This was apparent in the terrorist explosions in various areas in Damascus, as well as the explosions in Aleppo and the two recent terrorist explosions in the province of Idlib. Those were the two explosions where the Security Council failed regrettably to condemn them, and that was for unjustified political reasons. The same applies to the terrorist explosion which took place yesterday in Daraa and targeted a convoy of a team from the observer mission and led to injuries among the Syrian protective security forces accompanying that team. That incident led the Secretary General to condemn that explosion and all acts of violence and the explosion of explosive charges that take place in Syrian cities, in addition to the targeting of law and order forces, civilians, private and public property on a daily and continuous basis, as well as armed robbery, banditry, theft, vandalism, attacks on citizens in their homes and in their shops in order to provoke and terrorize them, the kidnapping of individuals for ransom, which money is then used to support terrorist activities. The number of those kidnapped from among the personnel of the army, the police, and the security forces during the period from March 24th to April 26th alone, 220 individuals. And some of these terrorist organized acts have carried the stamp of the Al-Qaeda methods and ideology, including mutilation of corpses and the killing of entire families based on purely sectarian affiliation and the carrying out of simultaneous suicidal explosions in more than one area. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been careful since the beginning of these events to emphasize the existence of armed terrorist organizations associated with Al-Qaeda who are carrying out the most horrible crimes in Syria. But many political parties and hostile media have cast doubts on that. And here today we are witnessing the public adoption by groups and organizations affiliated with Al-Qaeda of terrorist activities and operations carried out in Syria in response to calls issued by leaders of Al-Qaeda such as Al-Zawahiri, who called for jihad in Syria. We have also been hearing statements issued by the leadership of Western intelligence agencies admitting that Al-Qaeda branch in a neighboring state of Syria was the one which stood behind the terrorist explosions that Syria had witnessed recently in Damascus and Aleppo after the infiltration of elements from Al-Qaeda into the ranks of the armed opposition which is fighting against the Syrian government authorities. And various Arab and non-Arab media are telling us from one day to the other about the death of foreign fighters from various nationalities in Syria while carrying out terrorist operations in Syria. In fact, there are websites affiliated with Al-Qaeda organizations who lament the loss of members of their groups while carrying out their terrorist activities in Syria. Mr. President, I have a list that includes 26 names of terrorists. Some of them are associated or affiliated with Al-Qaeda. We have transmitted this list to the attention of the Secretary General and the President of the Security Council and the Chairman of subsidiary bodies on counterterrorism. In addition to that letter, we have admissions, confessions recorded from these same individuals in which they confess that they are terrorists and that they have arrived into the country in order to carry out terrorist operations. This evidence is available with our delegation, and we can provide any member of the Security Council with copies. In addition, Mr. President, we have this massive amount of documents. Documents, I repeat, recorded documents, they are all in English. And they all document terrorist activities and the names of individuals, along with their citizenships and those who have incited them and motivated them. And you will soon receive that as well, as will the Secretary General and the Chairman of subsidiary bodies. In addition, Mr. President, we have a list that contains 12 names of 12 terrorists who were killed in Syria. 12 foreign terrorists, including one French citizen, one British citizen, one Belgian citizen. This list also is available with us, and we will send it to you, and we request that you distribute it to the members of the Security Council. Mr. President, terrorist operations cannot be carried out without the availability of financing and support in the form of funds, weapons, and individuals. Unfortunately, some Arab, regional, and international states have provided these facilities to armed terrorist groups in order to carry out terrorist activities in Syria. These countries have pledged publicly and openly to provide support in the form of weapons, funds, and training, and the provision of safe havens for terrorists for the purpose of carrying out terrorist and sabotage activities against the peace and security of the Syrian state and the Syrian people. To do that, they are using smuggling across the borders of neighboring states. Mr. President, the supply of funds and weapons to armed groups is a reality encountered daily and every hour by the customs authority and the border guard in Syria. High-level officials in countries neighboring Syria have spoken publicly about disrupting operations to smuggle weapons, money, and individuals into Syria. For example, the statement by the Foreign Minister of Lebanon on March 20th about the Lebanese authority arresting 27 individuals on charges of smuggling weapons to Syria. Also, the statement by the director of the Jordanian General Security Services about the detention by Jordanian authorities of a number of individuals who have tried to smuggle weapons to Syria through the border crossings between the two countries. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we have sent tens of letters to the Security Council and to the Secretary General on this topic. Most recently was the letter we sent on April 24th concerning the terrorists who had been arrested in Syria after they infiltrated through the borders coming from other countries for the purpose of carrying out terrorist operations in Syria, most of whom belong to Al-Qaeda. On this occasion, I would like to notify your esteemed Council that the Lebanese authorities, whom we thank, have detained and seized on April 27th the ship called Lutfallah II, which had sailed from the Misrata port in Libya on its way to Lebanon via the port of Alexandria in Egypt, carrying the amount of 180 tons of various weapons and advanced communication equipment, including RPG launchers and French Lau anti-tank launchers and anti-aircraft launchers, and amounts of TNT explosives which were intended to be smuggled into Syria for use in armed terrorist operations. At